Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me here, well, online today, and giving me the opportunity to have a bit of a discussion about speaking hard truths. I feel exceptionally privileged to have been asked to speak at this event and share some of the knowledge that I've gained through my professional training, as well as in various spaces that give me the opportunity to learn from others and therefore share what I've learned as well. My job is basically having a lot of difficult conversations with a number of different people, and and I hope that I can share some of the things that I've learned throughout my time as a psychologist, and help you have the hard conversations that you need to in your life, especially when it comes to things like canceling plans or letting people down, as well as some of the guilt and shame sometimes even that comes from having to have those conversations and cancel those plans and do what you need to do to protect yourself. I am exceptionally privileged to have been asked to speak here today and represent for World Axial Spondyloarthritis Day, coming up now on the 3rd of May. Yeah, I'm very appreciative for being invited, and I really hope that what I share with you now is helpful. I certainly don't need a great deal of your time, because a lot of what I'm going to be speaking about is quite practical in nature. So I'll be giving you some examples of, what you can say, what you can do, and how to flip the perspective that you might have about these sort of things when interacting in these situations. So I do have a slideshow prepared. I will open that for you in just a second, and then we can get started with the presentation. I hope as well, although this can't be interactive and I can't join you live today, I hope that this does spark some interesting conversations and opens a bit of a dialogue around some of these things. And I hope that each of you, when doing this, get to share your experiences and what's happened with you, because that narrative and that exposure to those narratives really help us build and connect, how we might interact with these or in these situations when they are kind of thrust upon us at times, right? So let's jump into it in just a second. So, like I said, I'm exceptionally grateful for being invited here to this day to this event today. Sorry. My name is Dylan Benyon. I am a counseling psychologist, and I've had the privilege of working in a lot of spaces where mental health intersects with real life challenges, things like our relationships, our identity, pain, and even the unpredictability of life, right? Today, we're going to talk about something that is incredibly human, right? And that's difficult conversations, particularly how to talk to the people we love, people like our family, our friends, our partners, and doing so when our body or our energy levels just don't match what the world expects from us. So before we get started in all of this, I do just want to say, and I do want to acknowledge something, right? If you've ever felt guilty for canceling plans, right, or letting somebody down, you're not alone in that, right? We've all experienced something like that at some point in our life. It's sometimes difficult to say no, but it's such an important boundary I do a lot of hard work in therapy to help people build up those boundaries. On top of that, if you've ever stayed quiet to avoid being misunderstood, right, that also makes complete sense. If you've ever struggled to say, I just can't today, then this talk is for you. Let's jump into it. This first slide that I have up here, right, is helping us understand why it's so hard to have these hard conversations, why it's so hard to put ourselves into these spaces. If I can help psychoeducate you as to why why these conversations are so difficult, it'll help create a better understanding as I give you some of the practical tips as we go through this. So the first one, right, is that we are socially conditioned to show up. As some of you might know, we are social beings, right? We have a number of different psychologists that have written on, how we are socially determined in our lives by the conversations that we have with others, by the interactions that we have, from authority figures or friends or family or anyone, right? And society's values and society's norms oftentimes can clash when we are dealing with some sort of, chronic illness in the way that some of you might be dealing with axial spondyloarthritis. So society values being dependable, being productive. We know that, right? But chronic illness can make that feel almost impossible at times. So canceling can feel like an actual moral failure, right? Like you've done something morally wrong or something almost unethical by doing that. And that's not necessarily the case, right? The next one is that there's often guilt and shame associated with having these hard conversations and having to cancel plans somewhat last minute, right? You might wonder if other people think that you're unreliable or lazy or just making excuses. And those can easily lead to a buildup of, guilt, and shame. And you might even question if that person resents you for making that decision or dropping them, right? There's an internal dialogue that we fight when these sort of things happen within our own minds that at times can even be louder than the physical pain that we're experiencing. There's also this fear of rejection or being misunderstood. You worry that people just won't get what you're going through, or even worse, that they might stop inviting you altogether just because you can't make plans or follow through this one time because of what is happening with your body. Doesn't mean that in the future you won't be able to join or be able to attend or do whatever it is that's being asked of you, right? And that can be a scary, scary situation for a lot of individuals as well. And the last point that I want to speak about here is that relationships change as well. When AS becomes a part of your life, it also becomes a part of your relationships. Navigating that shift takes some courage, right? Let's give ourselves permission, right, to approach these conversations not as a burden, but as a practice, one rooted in honesty, care, and respect. What I'm going to do now, right, and I just put a little quote there saying, we're not just managing the symptoms, we're managing expectations, emotions, and the connection. And that's why it can be so difficult at times, right? Because it's a lot to manage when we are having these difficult conversations. What I want to do now is I want to share a three-part framework that can help guide you through having these hard conversations, right? And these are based on the following three that you can see on the screen at the moment: self-awareness, assertive communication, and managing reactions. And let's talk about each one of them individually, and I'll give you some examples as we go through too. Okay. Let's start with you, right? Let's start with you, the person that is dealing with everything that's going on in your life at the moment, as well as dealing with a chronic illness, and put you first here, right? We need to start with yourself before you even start opening your mouth, right? So it's important that you do a sort of self-regulation, self-awareness test as you are experiencing what you're experiencing before you have one of these conversations, right? What am I feeling right now? Am I feeling guilt? Am I feeling frustration? Am I feeling anxiety? Am I feeling a combination of multiple emotions here, right? The sooner that we can pinpoint what it is that we're feeling, right? The sooner that we can express that back to the individual so that they can have that empathetic connection and start to potentially show you some compassion for what it is that you're dealing with, right? Let's also ask ourselves, what do I need in this moment, right? And let's think about it, physically, emotionally, socially. If physically you simply cannot go out because of pain, or you can't have a conversation right now because it's too emotionally overwhelming, or you can't deal with being in a place with a large number of people, that's completely fine, right? But you need to acknowledge that first before you can relay it to somebody else. And then finally, the thing I want you to ask yourself is, am I canceling plans because I don't want to go or because I just can't go, right? If we're able to figure these things out, then we're able to communicate with more compassion, right? Both for yourself and for the individuals that you're speaking to. Okay. The next part involves the assertive communication. Now, I want to start off by telling you all, and I think this needs to be reiterated, right? Assertiveness is not aggression. It's honesty with kindness. I want to say that again. Assertiveness is not aggression. It's honesty with kindness. The way that we do this, right? The way that we talk about and say these sort of things is by using I statements. In psychology, we try and bolster that sense of identity and the strengths that you have by putting yourself first, right? And now, because you've done the self-awareness in the previous one, you've asked yourself the various questions, you've looked to see what it is that you need right now, why it's important to you, and what emotions are attached to those things, right? It's easier to then use these I statements to explain what it is that you're feeling. Things like, I'm feeling really run down today and I need to rest. I was really looking forward to this, and I'm really disappointed that I have to cancel. I would love to reschedule when my energy is feeling a bit better or when I'm not in so much pain, right? You want to try and avoid over explaining or apologizing for simply existing, right? You don't need to earn that rest, right? You do need to honor it though, right? And the last part of this whole thing, right, of my three-part framework for having hard conversations is trying to manage other people's reactions. And you'll see on your screen here, I've said, let others have their feelings. Now, we know, right, that we can't control other people. It's a challenge in our lives. We wish we could, right? Our lives would be infinitely better if we could control others, but unfortunately, we can't. We can only control ourselves, how we react, how we interact, and that's enough for these conversations, right? It's a bit tricky to try and manage other people's reactions, but I'm going to give you some tips to help with that, right? Some people might feel a bit disappointed in having a hard conversation where perhaps you need to cancel plans, right? Some people might not understand what's going on, and that's completely okay, right? What you can do, even though they don't understand, even though they feel disappointed, right, is that you can validate their feelings without compromising your own needs, right? And here's a couple of sentences that you can prepare and say, right, to assist you with this. Things like, I know that this is frustrating. I hate canceling too. Or perhaps, I get it if you're upset. I completely understand that, right? This isn't what I wanted either. And then even something like, thank you for being patient with me, right? It means more to me than you actually know. All of these, right? They assist you in softening the blow slightly, but you're validating and giving compassion and empathy back to them in the way that you're feeling what they're feeling, right? And you're creating a more harmonious space in which for these hard conversations to actually flourish and for people to learn, accept, and understand, right? And if somebody or consistently ignores or belittles the boundaries that you're trying to set up in here, it's pretty useful information too. Do with that as you may, right? What I'm trying to say here, right, is that if we let other people have their feelings and experience their own feelings, and you're solid and you're boundaried in the way that you're feeling and you're interacting and you're communicating, right? You're protecting your boundary, right? And at the same time, you're validating theirs. Okay. So now I want to talk about, and I've already given you a couple of good examples, but I want to give you some more practical strategies, right? So let's look at these. These are tools that we're going to use. These are real world usable strategies, right? Some of the things that you can do, and something that I think is quite beneficial for anybody that is struggling with AS, right, is to prepare some phrases in advance, right? When you're flaring, it's hard to think clearly. So having a few scripts ready can really help you. Things like, I'd love to come, but I'm not physically up to it today. My health is a little bit unpredictable at times. I'll confirm closer to the time if that's okay with you. Can we plan for something a little bit more low key this weekend? All of these phrases, right, can be pre-planned, can be pre-thought of, so that when somebody does drop something on you, perhaps last minute, that you've got something to say that might help you soften the blow, right? And that's what I want to talk about next. Create a soft landing. If you cancel, offer another connection alternative if possible, right? Perhaps you might want to ask them, hey, is it okay if I check in with a voice note, right? Maybe we can do a 5 minute check-in call, perhaps, right? Or maybe even something as simple as sending them a photo or a memory to show them that you're thinking of them. We don't want to leave them hanging and feel almost rejected in themselves, right? But finding an alternative or a compromise perhaps can be really beneficial in terms of softening that blow where we can, right? And then finally, the last thing that I think is important is that if we set our boundaries early, we don't have to wait for the crisis to happen, right? We let people know what living with AS looks like, right? So you meet somebody new or you're hanging out with a friend that's newer, you can explain to them that some days I'll need to cancel, right? Please just know that when that happens, it's not personal. This is just how I live, right? This is something that I live with on a day-to-day basis, right? You might also want to say, I love being invited, even if I can't always say yes. And that's to help, with them to continue inviting you and not just stopping altogether. Okay. Some things that you can say and do. All right. The next thing I want to discuss a little bit is reframing the narrative, right? And I think it's so important sometimes to try and flip our perspective. So let's reframe what it means to cancel plans and say no, right? So it's not necessarily about being flaky. It's completely, though, about being honest. You're not unreliable, right? You're living in a body that sometimes changes from moment to moment. Essentially, you're navigating a moving target, right? Every time, and that when you cancel plans, right, it doesn't mean that you're a failed friend. It doesn't mean that you're not going to show up the next time. It doesn't mean that you yeah. It doesn't mean any of that sort of stuff, right? Um, it just means that you are dealing with something that is bigger at times than that. It's bigger at times, sorry, than what you can handle, right? And it's important that you look after yourselves because self-care is really important here. Like I've gotten the second one, saying no essentially is self-care. It's a boundary that we're putting out that's going to protect yourself, right? And when other people then push those boundaries or ignore those boundaries, that can feel really, really uncomfortable. And you might end up in a space where, you could end up flaring up worse. You could end up in more pain, right? You could end up in a space where you're feeling emotionally drained or you're feeling social fatigue, right? And those are all things that can exacerbate what you might already be dealing with AS, right? What I want to say as well is that every time you speak up, right, well, especially, not even, especially when it's hard, you're not only protecting your body, but you're also modeling vulnerability and trust in the relationships, right? So that vulnerability essentially builds trust. And if you can have these hard conversations and set those boundaries effectively, but do so and communicate so compassionately and with empathy and soften the blow and all the things I've been speaking about now, right? It can be really, really helpful in terms of building that trust in those relationships as well. So what I wanted to add here is that I'm allowed, and I want you to repeat this after me, basically. I'm allowed to have limits. The people who love me will learn to love all of me, right? And I think that's such an important way to start to end off this conversation that we're having here today, right? So, as we start to close off with the session today, I just want to remind you that these hard conversations, as much as it doesn't always feel like this, are acts of love, right? Love for yourself and love for others, because you're letting them into your reality, right? You're giving them the opportunity to step into your space for a moment, feel what it feels like to walk in your shoes, and then essentially respect and appreciate the boundaries that you're setting, so that perhaps in the future you can spend more time together or have deeper conversations or spend time socially or share your thoughts and feelings with other individuals, right? You're allowed to say no, right? You are allowed to honor the limits that you have, right? And the people who love you will learn to love all of you, not just the yes version of you. Yeah, I think there was one more slide. just to remind you that yes, these hard conversations are in fact acts of love. So as I close off here, I just want to say thank you for letting me share the space with you, right? And also I just want to reiterate, thank you here for showing up for yourself, for this community, and for the honest human work of connection. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that it does spark conversations and dialogues between all of you guys that are watching this here. If you have questions, I'm sure that you can pop them into the chat and ask them and share. Like I said earlier, I think it's so important to have these conversations because, like I said in the beginning, right, we learn socially. So when somebody solved a problem in a unique way, that unique way might help you solve a problem in your own unique way as well. If anyone does or would like to reach out to me or get in touch, you're more than welcome to visit my website at www.cognitionandco.co.za. You're welcome to email at info@cognitionandco.co.za. Or you're more than welcome to send a message on our WhatsApp line 083 493 3544. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me the privilege of speaking here today. I hope that it's been helpful. I hope it sparks those hard conversations, and I hope it helps you navigate them effectively. Thank you so much. Bye.